The UK terror watchdog says a new comprehensive law is necessary to regulate the powers of intelligence agencies to monitor online activity. Now, this is from the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, David Anderson. He said the intelligence services should be allowed to continue collecting bulk communication data, but much stricter safeguards were necessary to prevent abuse of intrusive powers. Well, our correspondent John Brain was at this briefing where this landmark report was presented yesterday.
So he wants to start with a clean slate, start from scratch, bring in a new law which is fair for citizens but also gives power to the police and security agencies that he needs. Interestingly, he doesn't say those powers are too extensive at the moment, and he doesn't say they need new powers. This is really about oversight of the existing powers, and he's proposing the setting up of a new independent body which will be staffed by either serving or retired judges. And he says that any warrants for the interception of communications will need to be signed off by them.
Well, David Davis, you'll know him locally as the constituency MP for Halton, Price and Howden, but when you hear him billed nationally, he's often billed as a privacy campaigner or civil liberties campaigner as far as parliamentarians are concerned. He joins us on the line now. Good morning, Mr Davis.
Good morning. I assume the song that preceded us was not a coincidence.
Well, I'll leave that for you to decide. I'll leave that entirely for you to decide. I just wonder if you can tell us what your concerns are about this new bill.
Well, no, I don't. My stance on this is that Anderson's broadly got it right. I mean, look, there are 65 acts of Parliament which are used to justify or support one or other surveillance activity. And a lot of people don't even know what they are. I mean, even experts in the House of Commons don't know what they are. I mean, for example, ironically, the 1984 Telecommunications Act allows the Home Secretary to instruct British Telecom and people like that to do whatever she says, and they're forbidden by law to tell you they've done it. So vast amounts of law exist out there. And what Anderson's really arguing is that the powers are okay. They don't really need any new powers, despite all the stuff we've heard in the last year or two, but that the control of it is weak. And he's absolutely right. At the moment, the Home Secretary, we understand now for the first time, signs off roughly 10 warrants every working day. Now, if I had to sign a warrant to intercept your telephone, I would take a good deal of time over making sure the warrant was properly constituted, that there was a good reason for it, that there was no other way to do it, that the evidence was gathered to make you a proper suspect, and so on. That would probably take an hour. So 10 warrants a day is an astonishing number for a Home Secretary to do, particularly when you remember most politicians are not skilled in these things. They're not judges, they're not security specialists and so on. Much better that a judge does it, or a judicial system does it anyway, which considers it properly. It'd be faster, be more effective, it'd be more efficient, actually be better security, as well as better protection of our privacy. So, broadly speaking, Anderson's got it right. And indeed, the front page of the Times we showed this morning, what is, I suppose, a starting row between David Cameron and the Home Secretary on the one side, and those of us who take the concern of British privacy seriously on the other.
So what you're saying, paraphrasing effectively, is that the laws, the powers are broadly right. The powers are there. They're necessary to protect us against the threat of terrorism. It's the fact that they're not necessarily, in their current form, being held up to scrutiny.
Yeah, well, not just held up to scrutiny. That's one part of it. I mean, what he says is we're going to put together all of the weedy little sort of oversight arrangements we have. We have one oversight commissioner for surveillance, another for intelligence, another for interception, and all of them all of them are part-time, and they've got one or two members of staff, even though there are 560 million metadata warrants every year. They just haven't got the capability for it. He wants to make one big, powerful oversight arrangement. But much, much more important than that is that before the access is undertaken, I mean, just so your listeners understand, every telephone operator and every internet operator has to keep what they call the metadata, who called who, when and from where, broadly, for everybody for a year. And the question here is whether or not people, agencies, policemen and so on, can have access to it. And they're only allowed access if there's a proper reason. What he's saying is there's not enough control over that. He's right. There ought to be more control. Humberside, interestingly, Humberside police were asked a few years ago what they use these for, and it included things like traffic offences. Your phone basically being looked at because you're suspected of traffic offence. Ridiculous.
I don't understand the link there. What's the link?
God knows. I mean,
And is that your concern, effectively?
Whether you're in the car or something, I don't know. But
presumably that highlights the level of your concern that these agencies are effectively able to look at what they like, when they like, and potentially build up a case and for want of a better phrase, stitch people up.
Well, I'm afraid that's also possible. And generally speaking, you tend not to find that there's a form of an official stitch up, but you do quite often find that officials are involved in doing something. I mean, in America, this is much more openly discussed in America, but they've got almost identical systems to us in some respects. And in America, what you often find is people tracking down their wives, ex-girlfriends, all this sort of thing through this sort of system. You have large numbers of what you might term petty abuses and occasional serious abuses. And frankly, we're the home of freedom. We're the home of the rights of man. We're the home of modern democracy. We shouldn't put up with that.
You say that, though, but when you think about the political climate in which we're operating, on the 4th of June, you're quoted as saying that you felt the previous lot of surveillance laws, the Communication and Data Retention Investigatory Power Act, was rushed through and the government created, in your words, a bogus emergency.
That's
so
right.
When you're operating in that climate, how can we even consider that it's a free society?
Well, that's part of the problem, and what happened there again, so your listeners understand, is an Act of Parliament was pushed through the House of Commons in one day. It normally takes 3 months. In one day, and it was pushed through even after they'd been talking about it for 3 months in government, and it wasn't actually enacted for another 9 months. Pushed through in one day because they said it was an emergency. Well, it tells you quite how defensive and unwilling to get involved in open debate all governments, not just this government, all governments have been. And so that's what we've got to pull out, and that's why Anderson's done such a fantastic job here. He is the man with absolute access to everything. He can get all the secret files. He had a couple of barristers go through this. This is the best report of its sort I've seen in my lifetime, including right back to Radcliffe in the 60s and so on. It's a really, really well-done report. The government will be uncomfortable about it because it's fettering their powers. But we are the only country in the world other than Zimbabwe that allows ministers to decide whether your phone is tapped. Everywhere else, they have a judge do it.
And let's remember that these people are elected representatives. We voted for them.
You may have done, but, do you want to give them those powers? People say this makes it more accountable. No, it doesn't. When I ask the government under what authority you did this, that, or the other, they won't even answer that. They say we never comment on security matters, and of course operational security matters they shouldn't comment on, but they won't even tell you what laws they're using. So that's not accountability.
No, of course you can understand in the international fight against terrorism that they probably need to remain tight-lipped, and you would hope they're acting in the interest of their citizens. So how do you?
And you would hope they're acting competently. That isn't always true.
Well, indeed. So how do you maintain that balance? How do you scrutinise this? How do you make sure that the microscope is held up and these people are scrutinised whilst effectively fighting terrorism?
Well, the way you do it is what Anderson recommends, which is to allow judges effectively. And we're not talking about just any old buffer down the road. We're talking about a judge who's security cleared, has handled a number of intelligence and terrorism cases in the past. Somebody, indeed, the sort of person that's maybe lined up for this new job is the Lord Chief Justice, the last Lord Chief Justice. So you get very, very expert people to do it. They're very independent. They know the law, they know people's rights, but they also understand, as well as you do, in fact better than you or I do, the level of security threat there is as well. They do it, they'll do it faster, they'll do it more efficiently, they'll do it more expertly than any politician can. And our security will actually be improved at the same time as our protection and privacy will be improved as well. It's the way do you know what the Five Eyes are? The Five Eyes are the other countries that are in a close intelligence network with us. That's America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. They, and us of course, they all use judicial procedures, judges, not ministers. Why should we use ministers?
Interesting, isn't it? The final question to you, David, is do you think when you hear from privacy campaigners, they say privacy's dead? When you hear about the amount of data that's being collected upon us, Do we still have any privacy in this country?
Well, we do. I mean, look. I mean, I come at this from a rather peculiar position because I'm sort of public property. Everybody knows what I do every day of the week, you know. And if they didn't, there'd be people taking photographs of me and so on in the street. So I have a peculiar position in this. But the simple truth is that our privacy is under attack. It's not dead. You can protect yourself. One of the arguments that's going on at the moment is about encryption. The state, the government, don't like the fact that we can encrypt our data. If you've got a new iPhone or an iPhone with a new operating system on it, the encryption is now done in the phone. So even Apple can't tell the government how to get at your data. If you know, you've got to read yourself into it and do it properly. But so what's happening is there's a sort of battle going on, a continual arms race between individuals and people who want to look at their data. And it's not just government, by the way. It's also the Googles of the world and people like that, the Googles and the Yahoos. So that battle's going on. There's an arms race. I talked to David Anderson yesterday, and he said, you know, this was described as an arms race by one of the past heads of MI5. He said, that's as it should be. There should be a balance between the powers of the state and the powers of the big corporations and the privacy of the individual. And we can do that and still get at the terrorists, still get at the paedophiles, still get at the kidnappers if the state does its job properly. And that's what we all want. We want the best of both worlds, bluntly, and actually it's possible if we do it right.
Interesting to speak to you this morning. MP for Halton Price and Howden, David Davis, speaking to us on the programme there.